looking at wood, moisture, and concrete. Actually, 90% of all the problems with wood floors is related to moisture. If you eliminate the problems with moisture, you eliminate 90% of all of the problems with wood floors, which is enormous. It's a really important part of wood flooring. So I'm Mc Cabe. I work out of Amsterdam. I work in China, Ukraine, US, different parts of Europe. This is the National Wood Flooring Association in the US, and I'm a certified professional wood flooring inspector. So I inspect wood floors and forensically work my way back through the whole process to find out where the problem I'm inspecting started. Let's start with the language of wood flooring. Wood flooring has its own language, and I just want to touch on a few here. We won't go through them all, we just simply don't have time. If we take the first one, aluminium oxide. This is a finish, an extraordinarily hard finish. It's so hard, in fact, that on a piece of wood flooring like I have behind me here, you could take a 6-inch nail and attack it and try and scratch it, and you won't succeed. It is so tough. It's so tough that you can't refinish the floor. You need diamond tooling to resand the floor. And if it's used on solid wood flooring, it shatters. Solid wood will expand and contract, and even this aluminium oxide will shatter, like someone has taken a razor blade and just destroyed it. It shatters. Beveled edge or eased corners. Some of you would be familiar with that, but just let me cover it. If a floor is specified as GO0, it means that these 4 edges, 1, 2, 3, 4, are at 90 degrees. They're sharp. It's a square edge. If it's GO2, there's a bevel here, or a chamfer, on the 2 long sides, we call this, and the 2 short ends are square edged. If it's GO4, then you have a chamfer on the 2 short ends and the 2 long sides. That's GO4. Anyone know why you'd bother saying GO0 or GO2, GO4? It's to disguise unevenness in boards. Boards now are manufactured at high speed, and the accuracy is less than perfect. So by putting a small chamfer here, you don't get a lip. You would have a lip on the edge, the end, between it and the next board. So you disguise the fit by putting a small chamfer. Then you don't get a lip, a tiny lip between this and its neighbor, here or here. And that's necessary with 90% of pre-finished wood flooring. There's one exception, maybe you know it, Bruce. Bruce Flooring in America commissioned some people to make, I think it was 9 sanding machines, each one for $1 million or $1.5 million. Monsters. Each piece of wood is taken, and the metal dies come in, tongue and groove, and take it precisely through the sander. And it is, so they can then pre-finish with a square edge, and it will be flush. But the rest of the industry isn't going to spend $1 million, $1.5 million on one sanding machine. So the bevel is what's used to disguise uneven fit. It's a bit of a nuisance in a way, because it gathers dust. It's just somewhere else for grit and dust to sit. But it's necessary on pre-finished. Brushed is next on the list. And this is where you take a brush. It's usually stainless steel covered in brass. And the fibers are very thin, tiny, tiny fibers. And when you brush the wood, you're taking out the spring wood. And it gives you a textured finish. This is really valuable in some situations, such as an old folks' home, an area where you want anti-slip. This gives you some grip. So from that point of view, it's good, but it's normally associated with an oiled finish, not a lacquered finish. Because if you lacquer, you're going to fill up the grooves that you've just taken out with the wire brush, and you no longer have quite what you expected. You filled in some of the grooves, less texture is available. If you oil, you still have the full texture. For that reason, and for that reason alone, unless you're rich, in which case, if you're rich, you can go for it. If you're an ordinary punter and you simply want to lay a floor that you can maintain, don't go for brushed. Because if you need to sand any part of that floor, you need to sand the entire floor heavy to get the brushing out of it. You can't easily brush on site. You can't bring that floor back to its original state on site if it's brushed. It needs to be done in a factory. So it's something to take into account when you're buying a floor. Cover. I just put through this in here. It's mostly for America, but sometimes you come across it here. In the US, a 5-inch wood floor is sold as 5 inches. And so if you buy on the basis of it being 5 inches, you won't get your room finished because it only covers 4 1/4. And a 4-inch board covers 3 1/4. And a 3-inch board covers 2 1/4 inches. So the question always to ask with wood flooring is, what does it cover? So it's a 150 millimeter floor. It covers, 147. Well, you just need to know that. You don't want to be one board short. Distressed, of course, is to make a floor look old. This is very suitable, not for a modern house, but for old castles, old buildings. They may want a floor that looks the age of the building. Then you can distress it. Various ways of distressing. There is a market for distressed. People would distress by hand with chains and hammers and nails. And some people have designed machines to do it. Some people just went bananas, made great big boxes, and they would put the flooring in there with stones and lumps of metal and then turn it. And of course breaks the tongue and groove, just chaos. You can do it with simple rollers with bits of metal sticking out of the rollers. Just roll it through in a random way and you get a random pattern. But distressing is good, but it's not really a domestic thing. It's more for old houses. Another way of helping the distressing process is ammonia smoking. You simply take ammonia. We used pure ammonia in Ukraine, which wouldn't be allowed here. 24 hours, 48 hours of allowing the fumes simply to circulate around the oak. We used a 40-foot shipping container. And it changes the colour of the oak over the 48-hour period. So you can step in at 24 hours and say that colour is fine, or you can leave it 48 and get a rich chocolate brown colour and distress it as well, and it looks great. It's usually oak you do this with. It reacts well.
When they refer to double smoked, does that mean it's just been done twice?
No.
What does it actually mean?
That's waffle speak.
Waffle, so it doesn't mean anything at all?
Yes, it does. If you take my 40-foot container and you load it, you have racks. You have to keep everything separate. So you load it with your wood flooring. And all this oak has come from the same forest, been sawn on the same machinery, it's been dried in the same kiln, and you put it in the 40-foot container and you ammonia smoke, some comes out lighter than others. So that's separated. That becomes double smoked. That's where that comes from. Okay. Engineered, we all know. Engineered really is the future. We were talking about it earlier, that engineered is the way to go. Solid is, engineered is the better product all round, in my view. In principle, you don't get problems with engineered floors. Most of the problems with wood floors are because of moisture. 90%, in my experience, of the problems with wood floors are about expansion and contraction. And it's solid floors that do that. You save yourself an awful lot of bother by just staying away from solid. Floating, that's a good way to lay a floor. Floating is where the floor is not fixed to the subfloor. In fact, it's only fixed to each other with glue. So your floor essentially floats. It becomes one big panel floating in the room. And it's something you would only do with engineered, never with solid. Because the expansion and contraction of solid will break the bond and you'll have a real floating floor. Nothing will be attached to anything. Not to the floor, not to the walls, not to each board will be detached from the one beside it because of expansion, contraction. So you would only float an engineered floor. But it's a nice way to do it, it's good. Brian, you were saying you were interested in different ways of laying floors. What I see done very well is people floating a wood floor. By turning a board over like that. I don't know what you guys do, you'll have a different method, everyone has a different way of doing it. What I've seen and liked is people will put in, say, glue for about 8 inches, gap 8 inches, glue 8 inches, And it's done like that. And when you turn it over, gravity simply drops the glue down. You put in your tongue, and you have room on either side for the glue to spread out, not to come up on the surface. And it's enough glue to hold a floating floor. What's used here is PVA, and I don't know why. PVA glue goes rock solid, like ice. I mean, it's brittle when it goes. Isn't that correct, guys? It's just a standard wood glue for joints in chairs and furniture. And it's milky white, and it goes in, and then it becomes almost transparent and hard and brittle. A brittle glue, in my opinion, should never be used with wood. Ideally, what you want with any kind of wood flooring, and it doesn't matter where the glue is, whether it's glued down over the entire concrete, or ridges like Sikabond, you know, these battens, they call it, glue battens, or gluing tongue and groove, the glue should have some give, a little bit of give. Doesn't have to have a lot, just a little. I'll give you an example. If you float a solid floor, and people have, using a PVA wood glue, the solid floor will expand and contract and break the bond. And if you've ever tried to finish a solid wood floor that is now not connected to its neighbor, this is chaos. You can't do it. Everything's moving. The sander's moving, the floor is moving, you get nowhere, yeah? Because the glue is too hard.